welcome back to my channel. My name is Anna and I am the Messy Jew. If you haven't already, feel free to subscribe to my channel. You can also hit the notification bell, which is a good idea in my case because my videos don't always come out once a week on a set day yet. So notifications are a good idea, and I hope you'll like and share the video if you like it. But for now, let's learn about Purim. Purim is a biblical feast and a really fun Jewish holiday. It takes place during the 14th and 15th of Adar, or according to the Gregorian calendar, that's going to be somewhere between February and March. This year, it's March 12th, 16th and 17th. It is the 16th and 17th of March. I checked, that's when it is. Purim is a really fun, joyous, exciting, delicious holiday that literally took the day that could have been our demise and turned it into our day of feasting, because as the old adage goes when referring to Jewish holidays, they tried to kill us, God saved us, and we ate. That's all Jewish holidays. All of them. The Feast of Purim commemorates a really beautiful book of the Bible. They're all beautiful, but this one's my favorite, so I'm partial. I don't know if it's my full favorite. I have a lot that I really like, Job also, but like Esther is probably the most entertaining book of the Bible to read. I don't know if I can say that. Can you say that? I'm gonna say it. To me, it's the most entertaining book of the Bible that you can read. Maybe second to Song of Solomon. So it's all about the book of Esther. So the best way to find out about the Feast of Purim is to read the book of Esther. You can do it in one sitting. It's only 10 chapters, and the 10th chapter I think is only like a few verses long. It's a quick read and it's exciting. It reads like a really great story because it is. But if you're like, Anna, I don't have time, can't you just tell me about the story? Okay, I will. I will give you a quick Purim Spiel, which we're going to talk more about later. So, the book of Esther starts in Persia. And you may be wondering, why were all these Jews in Persia? Well, they were in exile, which is not fun. It's a really sad time. But this just goes to show that God never has his hand of protection off the Jewish people, off the apple of his eye. So it's around 478 BC, and the Jews are living in the empire of Persia under King Ahasuerus, or sometimes he's called King Xerxes, and then I think in Hebrew he's King Ahasuerus. Now the first thing that you should know about the book of Esther, so many feasts. So many feasts. I don't know what they were doing at this time, but like everything was like, oh, yeah, let's throw a feast. And they're Persians, they're not even Jewish, but like it's very Jewish. So anyways, King Ahasuerus is having a feast and he's having a big celebration, and it was lasting 180 days, this festival, this feast, all of this eating and dining and drinking. And then it literally says, chapter 1 verse 8, and no restraint was placed on the drinking. First mistake. Oh, okay, yes. And then in verse 10 it says, on the 7th day when the king was feeling good from the wine. Also not good, also maybe the first mistake. Anyways, so he's like, hey, you, go get Queen Vashti, tell her to put on her crown. I want her to come in because she's very beautiful and I want everyone to see her. And Vashti's like, no thank you, I'm not gonna do that. And then the king is like, I'm gonna go talk to my friends about this and see what they have to say. And they're like, you gotta get rid of her. All the other women in Persia are gonna be like, well, Vashti didn't come to her husband, so I'm not gonna do it. And so they were like, you gotta show her who's boss. You need to get a new queen who's like better than her. And he's like, let's do that. Now we come to Esther, who at the time, her Jewish name was Hadassah. So Esther is Hadassah's Persian name, and it means star. Hint why I'm wearing all of my stars. So we meet Esther, and she is in the care of her cousin Mordecai. So these are Jews who are living in exile Esther is an orphan, her cousin takes care of her, and then this order comes out that the king is going to look at all of the women in Persia. They're going to be taken into the palace. All the eligible women, all of the virgins, are going to be taken into the palace, and he's going to pick his new queen. So it says that Esther was taken. It doesn't even say that she gets to go voluntarily. She is taken into the palace. So then there's the makeover scene. There's like all of these crazy beauty treatments that they have to go to for months. But Esther finds favor with one of the eunuchs. So she's kind of like bumped up in the process. And then lo and behold, when they're all brought out in front of the king, she finds favor with the king. He chooses Esther and she becomes the new queen of Persia. But all along, Mordecai tells her, don't reveal your true identity. Don't tell anybody in the palace that you're Jewish. So you might be saying that's a little weird, right? And maybe wrong for Esther to hide her identity and for Mordecai to even ask her to do that. They're God's chosen people. They should be proud, right? Well, that's an interesting thing about the book of Esther, because you may be wondering, well, what did God have to say about that? We don't know. The name of God is not even mentioned in the book of Esther. And that's one of the interesting layers about this book. And you may be saying, Anna, stop right there. I have so many questions. We're going to dive a little more in depth into the book of Esther. So you have to come back to see my next video all about Purim as we kind of get a little more detailed, but this is just the overview. So then, Esther is the queen. Yay, that sounds great. No, because then Haman comes onto the scene. Boo! Everybody says boo, Haman. That's the thing you're going to learn about in the Festival of Purim. Boo! Oh my gosh, I almost forgot something really important. This is why you write an outline and you don't just wing it. But right before Haman comes on the scene, so Esther is crowned queen. Nobody knows that she's Jewish. Then Mordecai is hanging out at the city gate. And then two of the king's eunuchs are also hanging out. And they're like, you know what? I don't like the king. And he's like, yeah, me neither. And they're like, let's kill him. It escalates very quickly. Well, Mordecai is at the gate and he overhears this. He gets word to Esther. Esther tells the king, hey, two of your eunuchs are planning to kill you. And the threat is completely stopped. Now, this seeming little side plot here happens in like just a few verses. But at the end of those verses, so this is chapter 2 in verse 23. When the report was investigated and verified, both men were hanged on the gallows. This event was recorded in the historical record in the king's presence. Remember that for later. Then Haman comes on the scene. Boo, Haman. So Haman had a very high position in the king's court. Everybody would bow to him whenever he passed. He was kind of a big deal. But there was one person who would not bow to him. Mordecai the Jew. So every day when Haman would come into the palace gates, Mordecai would be standing there and everybody would be falling down and bowing, and Mordecai wouldn't. Now, we don't really know why. Maybe he was prideful. Maybe he thought that bowing to anybody was committing idolatry to God, and maybe he was a very observant Jew and he refused to do this. We don't really know, but either way, Mordecai doesn't bow. Haman gets very mad. Like very mad. Like so mad that he's like, who is this guy? What ethnic group does he belong to? Ah, that ethnic group, I will kill all of them. Again, it escalates very quickly. But is it escalating very quickly, or was this kind of a long, drawn-out, generational hate? Hint, yes it was. You're gonna have to come back to the next video to find out what I'm talking about. So, in chapter 3, verse 7, in the first month, the month of Nisan, in King Ahasuerus' 12th year, that is the lot, was cast before Haman for each day in each month, and it fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. Then Haman informed King Ahasuerus, there is one ethnic group scattered throughout the peoples in every province of your kingdom, yet living in isolation. Their laws are different from everyone else's, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If the king approves, let an order be drawn up authorizing their destruction, and I will pay 375 tons of silver to the accountants for deposit in the royal treasury. So basically, a Holocaust. He wanted to wipe out the entire Jewish race. But then what's worse is King Ahasuerus is like, sure, sounds good. Here's my ring. Take my ring. And because of that lot, the pur, that's where we get Purim. So don't worry, the story ends well. The Jews were not destroyed. I'm here. So anyways, then it is announced, decrees are given, posters go up around all of the provinces saying that, hey, around this time in the month of Adar, all of the Jews are going to be killed. Can't really even wrap your head around that, right? That just suddenly you find out that you and every one of your ethnic group is going to be killed and seemingly nothing can be done. There was weeping in the streets. Mordecai covered his head and put sackcloth on and is yelling and crying out in the streets. You can only imagine what a scene like that would look like. Well, Esther didn't really know, it sounds like, any of this was going on until Mordecai gets word to her. And he says, you have to do something. You have to go to the king and beg on behalf of our people. Well, Esther gets word back to Mordecai and says, everybody here knows that you can't just approach the king unsummoned. You have to wait for him to call you. And if I go to him without him calling me, I could die. And he hasn't summoned me for 30 days. Such a sad marriage. And then Mordecai says, maybe one of the most famous quotes from the whole Bible. Certainly it's one of my favorite. But he says in chapter 4, verse 13, Mordecai told the messenger to reply to Esther, don't think that you will escape the fate of all the Jews because you are in the king's palace. If you keep silent at this time, liberation and deliverance will come to the Jewish people from another place. But you and your father's house will be destroyed. Who knows? Perhaps you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Very powerful words, but what I love about it is the complete confidence that Mordecai has that God will deliver his people. Now, he doesn't say God, but we know who he's talking about. Who else would be protecting this ethnic group that it seems like nobody else cares about? They're in exile, for crying out loud. But he knows, he has such confidence in his identity as God's chosen people. So Mordecai knows that God has not abandoned them, that one way or another, they're going to be delivered out of this situation. But he implores Esther, maybe this is why you're here. You, a Jewish woman, the queen of Persia. So then Esther answers very wisely. She tells Mordecai to tell all of the Jews around him to fast for her because she is going to approach the king. And with amazing bravery, she says in chapter 4, verse 15, Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, go and assemble all the Jews who can be found in Susa and fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, day or night. I and my female servants will also fast in the same way. After that, I will go to the king, even if it is against the law. If I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went and did everything that Esther had ordered him to do. You can see why we celebrate this woman, right? So then Esther approaches the king. Drum roll. Is he gonna kill her? Is he gonna let her talk? Well, he extends the golden scepter and says, Queen, what do you want? He basically loves her at this point, it seems. And he says, ask me whatever you want and I'll give it to you, even if it's half the kingdom. And she says, if it pleases you, let me hold a banquet for you. So she plans this big feast. The feast is not just for the king, though. It's also for Haman. And the king says, yes, they do the feast together. So then they're having the banquet, they're eating and they're drinking, and the king says, Queen, what do you want? I'll give it to you. And she says, let's have another banquet. So many banquets. How many is this point? They had one with Vashti. They had one in honor of Esther when they got married. Then they had this one, and then this is the fourth one. So we're on to our fourth banquet now. So then she invites Haman and the king back to another banquet, and Haman goes home feeling like really good about himself. He's like, the king and the queen are having a banquet, and I'm the only guest. I'm very special. But then he rides by the gate, and look, there's Mordecai, and he is not bowing down. And Haman's like, oh, that Jew won't bow to me. And he goes home and he complains to his wife. So he's kvetching to his wife, and she says, have them build a gallows 75 feet high, nice lady. Ask the king in the morning to hang Mordecai on it. Then go to the banquet with the king and enjoy yourself. What's gonna happen? So then, that very same night, King Ahasuerus is not sleeping well, and he decides he needs a little bit of light reading, and so he's gonna read the royal records that record all the daily events, because what else would put him to sleep? So then, while the king is reading the daily court records, he happens to read the part about when Mordecai intervened and kept those two eunuchs from assassinating the king. And the king is like, hey, did this guy ever get rewarded? And his people are like, no, he didn't. And the king is like, we've got to do something. So then, this story is so great. You really just got to read the book for yourself. So then the king, brings Haman. He's like, who's around? I need to talk to someone, because he can't make any decision by himself, apparently. He needs his pals. And they're like, Haman's out here to see you. And he's like, bring him in. I have to ask him something. So the king asks Haman, he's like, Haman, what would you do if you wanted to really honor someone? And Haman was like, well. And so then in chapter 6, verse 7, Haman told the king, for the man the king wants to honor, have them bring a royal garment that the king himself has worn, and a horse that the king himself has ridden, which has a royal diadem on its head. Put the garment and the horse under the charge of one of the king's most noble. Anyway, so it's and then they'll have a parade. Everybody will see. It'll be a big affair. Real humble guy, this Haman. And the king's like, that's a great idea. And then he says, verse 10, the king told Haman, hurry and do just as you proposed. Take a garment and a horse for Mordecai the Jew, who is sitting at the king's gate. Maybe you've seen him. Do not leave out anything you have suggested. So then what happens? Haman has to go get Mordecai the Jew, who won't bow to him, who's the whole reason why he's committing this atrocity against the Jewish people. And he has to lug Haman through the city and have a parade with the royal garment and the horse. And Haman goes home literally with his head covers, and he is so upset. So he goes whining to his wife again. The poor women in this story. But his wife doesn't say, oh, build the gallows even higher. Actually, his wife and his advisors kind of issue a prophetic warning. They say, since Mordecai is Jewish and you have begun to fall before him, you won't overcome him because your downfall is certain. Boy, is it. Let's keep going. So then Esther has her second day of feasting with Haman, with the king. Maybe Haman's feeling a little better because it's well, I'm still having a banquet with the king and the queen. They really like me. No one else is invited. I'm still special. Maybe I can get over this. And then the king says, Queen Esther, whatever you want, I will give it to you. Even half my kingdom, it will be done. Queen Esther answered, if I have obtained your approval, my king, and if the king is pleased, spare my life, this is my request, and spare my people, this is my desire. For my people and I have been sold out to destruction, death, and extermination. And she's like, even if they were just going to make us slaves, I wouldn't have bothered you with it, sweetheart, but this is a big deal. And the king is like, who would do this? I love this story. And Esther's like, the adversary and enemy is this evil Haman. Dun, dun, dun. So, angered by this, the king arose from where they were drinking wine and went to the palace garden. Haman remained to beg for Queen Esther for his life, because he realized the king was planning something terrible for him. So there he is. He's like fallen over the seat where Esther was reclining. I imagine her just like after the king leaves, she just kind of like lays down like, my part is done. No, she's probably like, I bet maybe she fell down in relief. I don't know. So the king leaves, Haman falls over here, the king walks in, and he's like, now you're trying to sleep with my wife? What's wrong with you? They take Haman, they hang him on the 75-foot gallows that he had built for who? Mordecai the Jew. So then, Haman is dead, and the queen goes to the king and says, now please remove these edicts that are up that say, next month we're gonna all die. Can you take care of this? So it's all removed. And then literally the day that they were all supposed to be killed, it is a day of feasting. Edicts are put up saying that Jews have the right to defend themselves. Gentiles who are witnessing all of this are kind of like afraid of the Jews. I think it's a fear of God instilled in them, because they're like, how could these people who are in exile, they don't even belong here, have this sort of protection and their lives spared in this like crazy miraculous way? And then I believe it's pointing them to God, because how else could all of these crazy events happen? But don't worry, Mordecai gets honored too. He gets a beautiful purple garment put on him. He gets all of these special treatments. Also, the property and estate that belonged to Haman is given to Esther. Esther puts Mordecai in charge of it. And like literally everything is just wrapping up with a nice, beautiful bow. And then to top it off, the Feast of Purim is given, scheduled, enacted. It starts. Okay, they have the Feast of Purim. So Purim was from the lots that were cast that said, when am I going to kill these people? And now we celebrate Purim every year. So chapter 9 and chapter 10 are all about the word spreading and how the festival of Purim is established and everyone gets to celebrate. And it also describes exactly how we should celebrate. This is what I love about the Jewish feast, is it's like on this one you're sad, and then it's like on this one you're happy, and this one's a happy one. In chapter 9 of the book of Esther, verse 21, he ordered them to celebrate the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar every year, because during those days, the Jews got rid of their enemies. That was the month when their sorrow was turned into rejoicing and their mourning into a holiday. They were to be days of feasting, rejoicing, and sending gifts to one another and the poor. So this is how you celebrate Purim. You eat, you rejoice, you dance, you give food to one another, you give gifts to one another, you give food and gifts to the poor and the needy and those who can't celebrate themselves. And that's something that's still done today. Now, another thing that's done today is a lot of Jewish kids will take this festival day and they'll dress up kind of like Halloween. Usually it's like superheroes and good characters. And it's all about these hidden identities that are in the book of Esther. We're going to talk about that more in the next video, so make sure you subscribe and you come back. But they dress up, and one of the main things they do is they read Megillah Esther, which is the scroll of Esther. So they read the entire book of Esther on Purim, and I gotta say, it's my favorite part of the holiday. In my family, we really didn't do all the extra fun stuff. I do now, I love it. But we always read the book of Esther around February or March, and I loved reading it. But now when people read the book of Esther, whether in synagogue or like with their family, it's a loud, raucous affair. When the name Haman is said, everyone's like, boo, hiss, Haman. And then when Mordecai is said, everyone goes, yay, Mordecai, we love Mordecai, he's so great. And it's really fun and really wild, and it's a great way to get kids involved in reading the Bible. Sometimes there's even noisemakers too, like the groggers, like those things and all those things. What else? Then there's a Purim Spiel, which is kind of like what I just did. It's a very like silly retelling of the story of Esther, and it's a play, basically. It's a play about Esther. A lot of times the kids do it. That's a Purim Spiel, and it's where we get the word spiel when they're like, oh, give me the spiel, tell me about it. And then when people say, oh, they told me the whole story, the whole Megillah, or oh, I put on the dress, the heels, the crown, the whole Megillah. That's where that word comes from, the Megillah Esther, the scroll of Esther. So the most famous food that is eaten during Purim is Hamentashen. These are delicious, like butter, sugar cookies, and they're like a triangle. Hamentashen literally means Haman's pockets. But then sometimes, like, I think there's another word that's like Haman's ears. But they say that the triangle is like a weird triangular hat that he used to wear. But anyways, it's a cookie with like jam or like fig spread like hidden in it. I make mine with chocolate, sorry. But they're really, really good. You can also eat kreplach, which is like these meat dumplings in soup. I haven't made them. I'm gonna make them this year, so we'll see how that goes. But then the other key thing you have to do during the Feast of Purim is declare the miracle. Tell people about the story of Esther and recall this miraculous way that God, through his providence, uplifted the Jewish people during a time of exile. He made them successful. He made them known. He made himself known through them. Even though his name is not mentioned in the book, we can see his handwriting and he's part of it. He's interwoven through the whole thing. And it's obvious when you read it, which if you're not tired of it now by me talking about it, you should go and you should read the book of Esther. I'm just saying. So I hope you enjoyed this very professional, well thought out spoken video. I really love Purim. I'm really excited. We're doing a big Purim party this year. I'm excited to make and eat Hamentashen and to read the book of Esther with my family. I hope you'll do the same, and I hope that you will come back to my channel because I have a lot of really cool topics about Purim that I want to dive into. If you think that God's name is the only thing hidden in the book of Esther, you gotta come back because there is so much history behind these characters in Esther that goes all the way back to the beginning. Yes, the first book of the Bible, Genesis. So please come back. I hope you enjoyed the video. I already said the other stuff, so bye. Shalom, friends. So that is some that takes place during the my mouth is like all over the place. You know what? I'm gonna bring out Queen Vashti, I don't know. And because there are so many cool hidden and fun. We like to eat food that has stuff hiding in it, but like not food poisoning. Let me found it.